me something, girl. Are you tired in this modern world? Or do you need more? Is there something else you're searching for?
Tell me something, boy. Aren't you tired trying to fill that void? Or do you need more? Ain't it hard keeping it so hardcore? I'm falling. In all the good times I find myself longing for change, and in the bad times I fear myself.
Oh, talented people. Yeah. Well, we're kicking it off. New message series called It Happens. And it happens, right? Doesn't it? It just happens. Life happens. And this is not make-believe. This is not a fairy tale. We're not living at Disney, even though that would be awesome. This is real life. In my experience, my personal experience, what I experienced personally, and my experience as a pastor now going on decades tells me that life happens not in the shallow end of the pool, not in the end of the pool where you can stand, but life happens in the deep end. Like life happens in the part of the pool where you have to work really hard and you have to move your arms and move your legs just to keep your head, just to keep your mouth above water. That life is like that. My son, recently I have an 8-year-old son who's in 2nd grade. And most days I pick him up from school. And so I picked him up from school. This was just a few weeks ago. And I picked him up from school, and he's in tears. And he's crying. I'm like, oh, my goodness, what in the world? So we're kind of walking back to the car, and I'm like, hey, buddy, what's wrong? He says, Dad, my day was terrible. It's like, oh, well, what happened? And he goes on to tell me that at PE that day that the kids in the class were being mean, and they wouldn't let him play. And when they choose teams, they pick teams to play soccer, they didn't pick him. And they wouldn't even let him play. They wouldn't even let him be on the team. And I'm like, oh, man, I'm so sorry. And here I am as this dad, right? I'm the dad of this precious little 8-year-old. And I'm like, well, I don't want to be, like, negative. I don't want to, like, crush him, right? But I just want to go, like, this is kind of life, right? You know this, right? This is real life. This is what happens. There are people that are going to be mean. There are people who are going to say things that hurt. There's kids that are going to call you names. You're going to be left out. You're going to be made fun of, right? This is what happens in life. There are going to be people in life that try to help you and try to push you to do wrong things, to do things that aren't right. Like, this is life. And here I'm this parent of this 8-year-old, and I don't want to be like negative and just like, oh, life sucks, dude. Sorry, I don't want to like crush you, but I like this is just reality. This is real, and it's hard. It's hard for an 8-year-old, but it's hard for me too. It's hard for me to tell him because it's hard. It just happens. And you get this. I get this. You get this. Unless you live under a rock somewhere out on the beach. Like you don't have to be alive very long to get that life happens and it's hard. And here's where we're going to go these next few weeks as we're into this message series. Is what we want to do is we want to look at your dreams. Right? All of us have dreams for life. We all have things that we want for life. Like when you picture your life, when you dream about your life, when you think about your life, right, you have these dreams and what you dream of life will look like. And this is all the things that I want to accomplish as a person and in my job and my family. And then there's reality, right? There's just life. Like the day-to-day, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, right? And what happens is there's this gap. There's this gap between what we dream and what we really hope to accomplish. And what we want to do, and it happens, you'll see here on the screen, is what we want to do is we want to shine a light. We want to shine a light on the biggest threats, the biggest issues to the life that you really want to live and the keys to overcoming them. We want to shine a light on these threats and on these issues that keep you and that keep me from living the life that you want to live, the life that you dream of living. We want to help you and we want to help me kind of close this gap between what you dream about and where you are. Like this is who I am and this is who I want to be, and there's this gap, and how do we close that gap? And I would even say it goes even deeper. Like we want to even go deeper into this idea, and the stakes are even higher. See, I believe, if you were to cut me open, look at the core of it, I believe that you were created with purpose, for a purpose, on purpose. And regardless of how you're conceived, regardless of whatever happened there, you are not an accident. That you have a purpose. And I believe that God formed you in your mother's womb for a specific purpose, in the way that you look and your personality and your quirks and your gifts and your talents and all of that. None of that's a mistake. And it was all for a purpose, and it all has significance, and it all has meaning. You can say it this way: you were made on purpose for a purpose. Now, cut to the chase, I believe that your true purpose, your ultimate purpose, is only found in a relationship with God, in a relationship in life with God. In fact, there was a guy, first century follower of Jesus, his name was Paul. Even if you're not a church person, you probably heard of Paul. And he wrestled with this idea, and he taught about this idea. In fact, he wrote a letter to followers of Jesus in a city called Ephesus. And he summed up this idea perfectly in Ephesians chapter 2. You'll see it here. He says, hey, he's talking to the church. He says, hey, church. He says, you are God's masterpiece. He says, God has created you anew in Jesus so that you can do good things He has planned for you long ago. He says, hey, God created you to thrive. You're a master. You're a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. You're one of a kind. There's no one like you. There never will be anyone like you. And he says, not only that, there's a plan and a purpose for you. And there's a plan and a purpose for your life. And by the way, that plan and purpose is bigger than you. There's a grander purpose. And despite how you may feel this morning, despite how your week went, that God has good things, even great things, planned for you and for you to do. But what happens? Right? Life happens. It happens. Right? And life has a way of beating you down, right? Like life has a way of discouraging you. Life has a way of squashing your hopes and dreams and just sucking the joy out of you. It happens. It didn't happen all at once. It kind of happens slowly, right, over time. And what happens is over time, these threats or these issues, they kind of creep in, right? And what they do is they sabotage the life that you were meant to live. They take the life that you were created for and they begin to sabotage us. And so what we want to do these next few weeks is just kind of openly talk about this. And we want to talk about this. How do you overcome the greatest challenges that no one expects, but all of us experience? I mean, some of these are going to surprise you. These aren't things maybe you think about. But the reality is that we don't expect some of these things to happen, but we look back and go, how did I get here? How did this happen? No one expects them, but everyone experiences. And so these are key core ideas that we all face, and regardless of your age, regardless of your country of origin, regardless of your socioeconomic status. This may be your first time at Miami Church. None of that matters. We all face these. And much of what we're going to be talking about, too, is part of this inward journey. It happens in our hearts. It happens in our minds. And so our goal here today and in these next coming weeks is to just hit it head on. To just take an honest, authentic, as much as we can, look at these threats hit them head on and see what's keeping us from living the life that we want to live, and even greater than that, the life that we're called by God to live. And so I want to jump right in today to the first threat, and this one may surprise you a little bit, but here's what I think is the first threat to living the life you want to live: cynicism. Cynicism. Now, my oldest two kids, they attend a local public elementary school here, not far from here. And it's actually a great school. We are very happy with the school. We've had a great experience at the school. But going to the school office is worse than having root canal. It's painful. I mean, like every time I go to the school office, I feel like I should just apologize. Like, I am so sorry for making you do your job. I'm so sorry you have to do your job. I've never had a good experience there. No one's ever really been kind to me. No one's ever showed me any kind of respect. And I'm just, one day, I don't know if I'll ever do this, but one day I just want to look at them and go, what happened? Like at some point you started this, right? Like you started this because you cared, right? Did you start this job because you cared? Like, did you care about kids? Did you care about families? Did you care about education? I mean, there was a reason, right, that you started this. And I got to think that when you started this, you were full of hope. Right? That you had purpose and like, hey, I'm going to serve the community or I'm going to serve the school. But what happened? Like over time, right? What happened, right? Parents are rude, which I get. There's some idiot parents out there. I get it. Parents were rude and, oh, there's politics in the school system, or I just don't get paid enough, right? They don't pay, and they probably don't pay you enough. I don't even know what they pay you. And, oh, my parking spot's too far from the office. And if it's raining, I get my hair wet. It's terrible. And I got to get here early every morning. I got to be here like 7 a.m., right? And so what happened? Like over time, right? Over time, you've become jaded and you've become cynical. And now I tell my friends to avoid you, right? And I'm one of the good ones. I think I'm one of the good parents, right? I avoid you now at all costs. Don't go to the school office, whatever you do. That's what I tell people, right? Now, it's easy to pick on my elementary school staff. But if I'm being honest, if I'm being real, I've become jaded. I've become cynical, right? I mean, people, right? People. I work with people. Well, they're just going to let you down, right? Isn't that what people do at some point? I mean, somebody, they're just going to let me down. So why open myself up there? Because eventually they're going to let me down. Or man, Miami's just so transitional. You know, people come, people go, and so eventually they're going to leave, right? I mean, no, people just don't commit anymore. They don't stick around. That's what people do, right? And I didn't set out to be cynical or jaded, and you don't set out to be cynical and jaded. It's not like in your yearbook in high school, right? You had your picture that you, like your sophomore year, right? You didn't like write beside your picture like, man, I hope to grow up and just be jaded and distrustful of humanity before I hit 40, right? You didn't write that. You didn't write, hey, I'm also hoping that my cynicism will damage my family and make it impossible for people to work with me. Go Eagles, right? You didn't write that in your yearbook. No, instead, right? When you were in high school, when you were in your late teens or 20, like you were optimistic. You were even idealistic, right? You were like, hey, I'm going to change the world, and I know how I'm going to do it. So how do you go from idealistic to cynical in just a few short years? Like you've seen it, right? Maybe you've experienced, right? You got a friend whose heart has been broken so many times that they just say, well, I just can't trust any guys anymore. No way. You got an optimistic college roommate who maybe got into investment banking but found out that, hey, I just think now that everybody's in it for themselves. Everybody's all about making money for themselves, and now that's what they're doing. Or you got a neighbor who's a cop, and they've just seen too much, had too many experiences, and now they can't believe the best about anybody. Maybe even a teammate at work, that every idea you have, you bring an idea, you bring a new, fresh perspective, and all they do is shoot it down. Like, that'll never work. That strategy's doomed to fail. Like, why so cynical? Well, here's just maybe a few observations of why I think cynicism is such a big idea. First one is this. This is interesting. I think that cynicism starts not because you don't care, but because you do. Like, cynicism starts not because I just don't care. It's like, no, I do care. And it starts because you poured your heart into something and you got little in return. Or maybe you got something in return, but it wasn't what you expected or even what you had desired. Right? You fell in love only to have the relationship dissolve, right? You threw your heart into a job, you gave it your all, only to be let go. You were completely there for your mom, only to have her tell you you're such a disappointment. See, cynicism starts not because you don't care, it's because you do. Here's another observation, is most cynics are former optimists. You would never know it now, but there was a time when they were hopeful and enthusiastic and even cheerful. This is something I believe inside the human spirit, right? We were built for this idea of hope. We all want hope. We all want things to get better. We all want progress. Like nearly all of us start out life with a positive outlook. But what happens? Like, how does this happen? It's like you know too much, right? You just know too much. You know too much. You would think knowledge is a good thing, right? That knowledge is a great thing. And strangely enough, knowledge will oftentimes sadden you. If your heart's been broken a dozen times by different people, you would find it easier to develop deeper friendships. If your business partner hadn't sold out and gutted the company, you might still be an entrepreneur. If your neighbors hadn't been so difficult, maybe you wouldn't have had to build the fence, right? You just know too much. You've experienced too much, right? And we've experienced heartbreak and betrayal and backstabbing. And you just go, well, people just let you down. Like people just can't be trusted. You know, love hurts. People are fickle and selfish. And you recognize that not everyone succeeds despite good intentions, despite best efforts. And knowledge often brings sorrow because the more you know, the more you will see that for life for what it really is. Have you ever said this? Well, I just know how that's going to end. Well, I know where this is going. Right? That's the words of the cynic. And the problem with this way of life is that cynicism caps your potential, right? It crushes your dreams. If you have this dream of where you want to be in life, or as I would think, God has this grander purpose for you, and what cynicism does is it caps you. It brings it down. It puts a glass ceiling there. And so what's the answer? I mean, once a cynic, always a cynic? It's just how it is, Greg. It's 2019. You just have to live this way. See, I believe actually that cynicism is a choice. That life doesn't make you cynical, that you make you cynical. See, cynicism is a choice. And cynicism will keep you from living the life that you want to live. It will keep you from fulfilling your grander purpose. And the cruelest part, the worst part about cynicism is that it squashes hope. Hope that there can be a better tomorrow. Hope that the future will be better than the past. Hope that it can be different. Hope that you can feel again. What's interesting is Paul, this guy I mentioned earlier, who helped start churches all in the first century, and he wrote letters to the churches. And Paul, he went through all kinds of experiences in his life. He had a lot of hard things, and I think he understood this. And in fact, he wrote to one of the churches, and he gave the church practical advice. He said, let me just give you some practical advice. And buried in this, is advice on how to kick cynicism in the teeth. And he's going to write this. And so I want to show it to you here. Let's walk through it real quickly. He's writing to a church in Ephesus. It's found in what we call Ephesians chapter 1, verse 15. And here's what he says. You'll see it on the screen. He says in verse 15, he says, ever since, he's writing to this church at Ephesus. He says, ever since I first heard of your strong faith in the Lord Jesus and of your love for God's people everywhere. Now, just a little context. Paul is in prison, okay? He's in prison, and he hasn't been to visit these people at this church. It's been at least 5 years. Okay, so he's just getting reports back from people that are there, and they're coming to him where he's in prison, and he's getting reports back. And all that he keeps hearing about consistently, every report, there's like a theme. He's like, hey, Paul, you got to know that, man, these people just have strong faith. And these people, man, their love, there's something about their love. And so Paul keeps hearing about their faith, that it's strong. And it's growing. He keeps hearing about their love for people and how they love people. And you see in here, he says, you know what, guys, if you want to kick cynicism in the teeth, one of the things you need to do is you just need to practice hospitality. You just need to practice, because there's something about hospitality that just opens you up to new people and to new ideas. There's something about sharing a meal with people, sitting around a table. There's something about asking questions like, tell me about this. Tell me about your life. What are you passionate about? What are you into? There's something about listening to someone's story There's something about this spirit of openness and hospitality that just squashes cynicism. Now, if I want to pause here for a second as pastor and just brag on you guys. I don't get to brag on you guys enough, but I want to just brag on you guys for a minute. Because one of the things we said from day one when we started this church, when we were just a few people on a patio, one of the things we said is, hey, Miami has a reputation, right? There's a reputation that Miami is rude. In fact, we've been voted in the past one of the rudest cities in America, right? They didn't talk to me, but that's what they said. And I got offended by that, right? And they said, okay, that's fine. You can label us in Miami and maybe go to the school office and you'll feel it. But but we get labeled, right, the rudest people in the United States of America. And we said, hey, that's fine. What we're going to do at Miami Church, our plan, our goal, our hope, is that we'll be the nicest place, the friendliest place, the most welcoming place in Miami-Dade. That's our. We said that from day one. And we created a team. We have a team that's called the Nicest People Ever, NPE, Nicest People Ever. They've not allowed me to be on that team yet, but it's the Nicest People Ever. Most of you are on it. You're good at it. And I got to say that you guys, the thing that I hear almost every week, the thing that I'll follow with people that visit Miami Church, people email me or call me or text me or whatever, is they'll say, man, I'm not sure about everything. I'm not so sure about your church. Your sermon was kind of terrible. But people were friendly. Like it was I felt welcome there. And Paul is saying, hey guys, if you want to like crush cynicism, if you want to kick it in the teeth, like practice hospitality. Like open yourself, share a meal. Sit down for a slow coffee or lunch with someone and just ask their story, ask questions, just open yourself up. Look what he keeps saying. He keeps writing. He says, hey, verse 16, I have not stopped thanking God for you. I pray for you constantly. He says, your faith in Jesus, your hospitality, your love for people, it drives me to pray. And I don't just pray like, I pray this prayer of thanksgiving to God for you. And my prayer for me, my prayer for you, is that we would hold on to hope and that we would be able to kick cynicism in the teeth, because the reality is that no matter what happens tomorrow, no matter what happens next month or next year, we can stand firm and not be jaded and cynical. He keeps writing this. Look what he says. It gets a little thick in the language, but look what he says. He says, I pray, and here's what I pray. Asking God, the glorious Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, like the heavenly Father, the creator of all things, of Jesus, here's what I ask him. I ask God to give you spiritual wisdom and insight, so that you may grow in your knowledge of God. And this is not like just well, I know about God, I'm super smart, let me tell you. No, this is like a knowing God beyond the surface. This is not like knowing things about God. This is like experiencing God on a deeper level. This is like knowing deeply the heart and integrity of God. This is knowing God on a level that despite what happens, you have this deep belief and trust. Because what Paul is saying is, hey guys, guess what? There's going to be times when God does not make sense. There's going to be times when your life is hard. There's going to be times when it doesn't make logical sense to you, and you're going to be discouraged and give up. And when you're frustrated, here's what I want you to do. I want you to understand, and I want you to experience his heart. Because there's going to be times that it's really, really hard, but I want you to understand and experience his heart. And buried in this idea of God giving us spiritual wisdom and insight so that we can grow, buried in this is this idea of pursuit and of seeking and of striving to know. In fact, I would say buried in this is this deep-seated sense of just curiosity. Right? This idea of like, I just want to know, I want to experience, I want to know God. And wonder and seeking and maybe even a desperation to know. Asking questions, seeking to understand. God, who are you? What did you create here? What about all these people that are around me? These weird people I'm looking at right now. God, what about these people? Because here's the reality, this curiosity, this seeking, this desperation. Curious people are never cynical, and cynical people are never curious. Curious people are never cynical, and cynical people are never curious. The curious are always interested. They're always hopeful. They're always open. I think one of the number one ways to combat cynicism is curiosity. curiosity. Let's keep going. Verse 18. He says this. He's still writing. I pray, this is his prayer still. I pray that your hearts, I mean, this language is crazy. I pray that your hearts will be flooded with light. Right? You just envision like a dark room. Have you ever been in like a really dark room and maybe you had a flashlight? And you can flip on the flashlight and all of a sudden it opens up, right? It's like, I pray that your hearts won't be in the dark, but they'll be flooded with light so that you can understand the what? The confident hope God has given those he called, his holy people who are rich and glorious inheritance. He's like, man, I want the eyes of your heart, your soul, right? Not to live in the dark, but like a flashlight in a dark room to be illuminated, right? I want you to see. I want you to see so that you can have hope. He's like, hey, Paul knows, like, Paul's experienced it, right? Paul's seen it. He's been doing this for years. He says, listen, I know it happens, right? It's going to happen. Life happens. And I'm not telling you to ignore it. I don't, like, this is not like bury your head in the sand, like, oh, it's all good. It's just flowers and rose petals. Like, no. I'm not saying that. But what I'm telling you is, if you could really see, like if you could really have perspective, if you could see the bigger picture, right? If you could have full perspective and not just see the little part that you see or the little part that, if you could see the bigger picture, you would not lose hope. He's saying, hold on to hope. No matter what happens tomorrow, no matter what happens this week, don't lose hope because there is more happening than you can possibly know and see. There is a grander plan. Hold on to hope. Do not lose hope. It says, don't lose hope in doing good, right? Do not lose hope. Here's what he says. Verse 19, he kind of wraps this part up. He says, I also pray that you will understand, this language is crazy, that you will understand the incredible greatness of God's power for us who believe in him. Understand the incredible greatness of God's power for us who believe in him, right? He's going to start telling us where the source of hope comes from. This is the same mighty power, right? He's saying you have availability, right, to live in the power and the hope, the same mighty power that raised Jesus from the dead and seated him at the place of honor at God's right hand in the heavenly realms. And so Paul is saying, hey guys, church, I know, I get it, life happens. And Paul, he could tell story after story after story that of his personal experience. He's been shipwrecked and he's been bitten by snakes. He's been beaten. He's had rocks thrown at him. He's had to flee for his life in the middle of the night. Like, dude, I've been there. Right? I get it. I get it. But he's saying, hey, guys, don't lose hope. Don't become jaded. Don't become cynical. He says, man, your faith and your hospitality, keep it going, guys. Like just whatever you got to do, be hospitable. Just keep churning hospitality. Like, open yourself up to others. He's saying, hey, stay curious. Keep seeking God. Keep asking questions. Keep hearing people's stories. Keep pursuing because the cynical are not curious, and the curious can never be cynical. And he's saying, hey, don't lose hope. Now, here's the big idea. Right? Cynicism melts under the power of the gospel. Cynicism melts under the power of the good news. And here's what I mean. See, God understands our world. He understands how brutal we often are and how awful human nature can be. He understands that 8-year-olds go to school and get left off of teams and can't participate, and it crushes them. See, God sees how violent we can be toward one another and toward ourselves. God sees all the cruelty. In fact, without God's intervention in the narrative of human story, life would be nasty, brutish, and short. But here's the good news. Instead of letting inhumanity have the final word, God entered the mess. God entered the mess in human form through his son Jesus, and he conquered hate with love. And we threw the worst of humanity at Jesus. I mean, the worst in his face. Hatred, abuse, ridicule, rejection, and even death. And God turned it into life. And not just life for himself, but life for us, life for you, and life for me, and life for humanity, and life for even the people that killed him. Life. See, the cynics, they thought they were winning on the Thursday of Jesus' last few days. Like they thought they were winning. They really thought they were winning on Friday, right? On Good Friday. They thought they had the final word, right? They were in control. Despair had won. Like even, think about it, even his 12 disciples, right? These guys that followed him for like 3.5 years and that were there with him, like even they thought it was over. Like even they walked away, even they went back fishing. But nobody saw Sunday coming. Nobody saw hope rising. No one saw love breaking from the ashes of hate. Nobody saw Jesus coming back. And here's the remarkable part, right? This is it. The remarkable part of following Jesus, of believing in Jesus, of giving your life to Jesus, the remarkable part of that is not that Jesus came as a Savior to deliver us. The remarkable part is that Jesus knows you. He knows who you really are. He sees who you really are. He's with you and sees you, and He loves you anyway. See, Jesus stared hate in the face, and He met it with love. Jesus confronted despair, and He made it abundantly clear that it wouldn't win. In the heart of the gospel, the thrust of the good news is that Jesus sees your hate, and He meets it with love. The good news is, the heart of the gospel, the heart of the good news is that Jesus sees your despair, and He counters it with hope. The heart of the gospel, the thrust of the gospel is that Jesus sees your doubt, and He just lobs belief at you back over and over and over and over again. And cynicism melts under the relentless hope of the gospel. Your past isn't your future. Your story is not over. This is not the last chapter. And bitterness cannot linger under the relentless assault of love. Hope cannot die. If the tomb is empty, if Jesus is really alive, right? Hope cannot die. And Jesus kicks cynicism in the teeth. And the good news is, yeah, I'm fired up, is you can and I can too, right? Paul says, how do you do that? He says, through the power of Jesus. And that's the invitation to you today. It's the invitation to me today. We don't have to live full of cynicism and jaded. Right? We don't have to go, well, it's just how it's going to be. That's how it always ends up. We don't have to live that way. We can live in hope. We can reject cynicism. We can trust again. We can believe again. We can hope again because there is good news found in Jesus. And may I just pray a prayer over you and me this morning? God, I believe that you are alive and that you are here and that you are available to all of us in this place. And that hope is alive, God. And no matter what happens to us this week, no matter what happened to us this past month, no matter what happened to us as a kid or whenever, God, there is hope found in you. And God, I believe there's some of us in this room this morning that just need an injection of hope. That's something in our heart, God, that just needs that injection. So God, would you just give that right now? Your past is not your future. Your story is not over. And God, I believe there is hope to be found in you. God, we live in a community, we live in a city, we live in a neighborhood that is just desperately in need of hope. Desperately in need of hope, God. And we can chase it through money and through success and through clothes and through look and through status and through how many followers I got on Instagram. That's awesome. God, we can chase it however we want to. But God, ultimately that's going to end up empty because true hope is only found in you. So God, those of us in this room who maybe need to turn to you, pray that we would do it today. That we would find hope in the good news of Jesus. So God, remind us now in these moments, God, that there is hope. And whatever we're experiencing, whatever we're feeling, God, that we're surrounded by you. And that you're with us, God. You're helping fight our battles for us, God. And we're not alone. And that's the good news. And so we pray this now in the name of Jesus. Amen.